A thread by the ghost of Daniel Parker. Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, the McCain Republicans. What did they know, and when did they know it? Part 2. In Part 1, we took a look at the men behind the Washington Free Beacon, WFB. Link in the thread, video on this channel. In Part 2, let's narrow our focus to a remarkable article Bill Kristol wrote for the Weekly Standard website on July 24th, 2016. Donald Trump in the Washington Examiner. Link in the thread. Some context. July 24th, 2016 was a week after Donald Trump was nominated to be the GOP's candidate for president, and 2 days after WikiLeaks released the DNC emails. Trump was experiencing a bounce in the poll coming off the convention. Then the DNC email scandal hit. Even prestige press was forced to take notice. Could Trump really win? Link in the thread, time.com, Republican National Convention gives Donald Trump poll boost. Not so fast, saith Bill Kristol. He warned there were reasons for Trump to be concerned. Quote, one reason in particular hasn't received sufficient consideration. Trump campaign ties to Vladimir Putin. Russia had not been a hot topic in the primaries up to that point, so most people ignored Kristol's warnings. Was Kristol extraordinarily prescient, or was something else going on? Kristol's article is short. It feels almost like a series of talking points. Quote, Trump's business seems to be heavily dependent on Russia investment, end quote. His top campaign advisor, Paul Manafort, was the advisor to the Putin-backed stooge, Viktor Yanukovych, and has deep ties to the Putin apparat, end quote. Open quote. One of Trump's national security advisors, retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, was paid to give a speech at a Russia propaganda celebration and was seated next to Putin. Trump's Russia advisor, Carter Page, who does much of his business with Russian companies, has argued, among other things, that, quote, a few officials in Washington annexed Ukraine and that the so-called annexation of Crimea by Russia was a rational response to this injustice, end quote. In retrospect, and by the way, this was published August 23rd, 2019. In retrospect, after months and months of nonstop Russia, 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 it's difficult to recall how much talk there was of Manafort and Flynn's connections to Russia prior to July 26th. I believe I recall some discussion of Manafort and Russia, but I have no memory of Flynn's Russian connections. When answering the question, who is Mike Flynn, in December 2016, only one paragraph is dedicated to Flynn's ties to Russia. From CNN.com, who is Michael Flynn, Trump's national security advisor pick. We can probably all agree that very few people had ever heard of Carter Page in July 2016, much less his connections to a particular foreign country. Kristol is not finished. Quote, furthermore, practically the only change Trump's campaign made to the GOP platform was to weaken language supporting Ukraine. End quote. Fake news. Quote, WikiLeaks, which appears to have connections to Putin's espionage apparatus, has released emails that are damaging to Hillary Clinton immediately before the Democratic convention, end quote. On the 24th, the very day Kristol's article is published, Manafort gets a question about whether the Russians were behind the release of the DNC emails in hopes of helping Donald Trump. Let's see what Paul Manafort says.
I'm wondering if you could respond to what Robbie Moon, the company manager for Hillary Clinton, said this morning, which was connecting the email leak and the Russian breach of the emails to helping Donald Trump's campaign. There was an allegation that the Russians were trying to help Donald Trump by releasing these emails.
They're pretty desperate pretty quickly, that's all I have to say on that. I mean, it's a far reach, obviously. And to lead their convention with that tells me that they really are trying to move away from what the issues are going to be in this campaign. It was pretty absurd.
Quote, finally, Trump, to the cheers of the Kremlin establishment, has said he will not uphold our NATO commitments, end quote. Also, on the same day as the publication of Krystal's article, HRC, Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, Robbie Mook, was interviewed on CNN. See how many talking points you can recognize.
So I have to ask, what is the reaction of the Clinton campaign to these DNC leaked emails suggesting that top officials, including the CFO there, were actively discussing ways to hurt Bernie Sanders in the primaries?
Well, I think the DNC needs to look into this and take appropriate action, and I'm sure that they will. What's disturbing to us is that experts are telling us that Russian state actors broke into the DNC, stole these emails, and other experts are now saying that the Russians are releasing these emails for the purpose of actually helping Donald Trump. I don't think it's coincidental that these emails were released on the eve of our convention here, and that's disturbing. And I think we need to be concerned about that. I think we need to be concerned that we also saw last week at the Republican convention that Trump and his allies made changes to the Republican platform to make it more pro-Russian, and we saw him talking about how NATO shouldn't intervene to defend our Eastern European allies if they're attacked by Russia. So I think when you put all this together, it's a disturbing picture, and I think voters need to reflect on that.
So I have to ask.
Well, isn't that great? The thread continues. 2 days later, on July 26th, Carter Page has the following text exchange with a reporter from the Wall Street Journal reporter. All right, let's take a look at this. Wall Street Journal reporter, Damian Paletta, I think is the name. Damian says to Carter, "Hi, Carter. Wanted to tune a few things by you. Whatever. I've always appreciated your candor, and I just wanted to be straight with you and ask about some things our reporters have picked up. We are told you met with Igor Sechin during your recent Moscow trip and discussed energy deals and the possibility of the U.S. government of lifting sanctions on him and others. We are also told you recently met with a senior Kremlin official, Divyekin, and he said they have solid compromat on Clinton as well as Trump. Guidance? Thoughts?" Carter Page responds, "Divyekin? I just Googled that name and nothing is coming up. The name doesn't ring a bell. All off the record, as usual, and I'm not going to comment on my meeting agenda while over there. But the compromat allegation falls right into the McCarthyism point we discussed yesterday. Same for the sanctions lifting point. It's such a ridiculous idea that it almost warrants a double no comment." Okay. The thread continues. All this is happening as Page and Manafort make their first appearances in the Steele dossier. On the surface, it appears there was a massive, coordinated effort in the week between the Republican and Democrat conventions to initiate the Russia narrative. And it's not just the DNC and the media involved. The McCain Republicans are equal partners. Back to Krystal's column. Quote, "These indications provide sufficient grounds for Trump's links to Putin to be further investigated," end quote. And what happens a week after Krystal's column is published? The FBI opens Crossfire Hurricane. How about that? And oh, here's a Pete Strzok. He's only following 51. Only following 51 people. But of course, Bill Kristol's one of them. Credit to Julie Kelly for her outstanding article. She's great. Link in the thread, amgreatness.com, the weekly standards ties to Fusion GPS. At least one more part to follow. And thanks for listening, everybody. I don't have my Trump pen, so it's at my sister's house. So I will be the greatest president that God ever created.